You're walking home, alone. The streetlights end 2 blocks before your door. Something moves in the hedge beside you. Just a rustle. Could be wind. Could be a cat. But your whole body reacts before your brain finishes the thought. Your pulse spikes. Your steps quicken. Your eyes lock onto the dark gap in the leaves, searching for a shape, a shadow. 2 eyes catching light. There's nothing there. Probably. But you don't stop scanning until you're inside, door locked, heart still going. And here's the question nobody asks. Why does your mind assume instantly, automatically, that something is watching? Why not assume nothing? Why does the human brain default to presence instead of absence? That reflex, the one that just made you flinch at a hedge, is, according to a growing body of archaeological and psychological evidence, the same reflex that gave humans their first god. We're not talking about religion. Not yet. Not temples, not scripture, not commandments. We're talking about something that happened tens of thousands of years earlier, in the dark, with no words for it at all. We're talking about the moment an ancient human first believed something unseen was paying attention to them. How that happened. How a survival reflex became a belief system that would eventually build pyramids, empires, and entire civilizations, is a question that took researchers decades, several wrong turns, and 1 buried mountain in Turkey to even begin answering. That question stays open for now. Hold on to it. Because the answer is stranger, older, and far less human than you'd expect. For most of the 20th century, archaeologists told a clean, orderly story about how religion began. The order went like this. First, humans learned to farm. Farming created surplus food. Surplus food created settled villages. Settled villages created leisure time, social hierarchy, and eventually priests. People whose job was to interpret the unknown. Temples came after towns. Gods came after grain. It made sense. It was tidy. It was also wrong. In 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt began excavating a hill in southeastern Turkey called Göbekli Tepe. What he found underneath that hill didn't just complicate the old story. It inverted it completely. Massive stone pillars, some over 5 meters tall, arranged in circles, carved with foxes, scorpions, vultures, snakes. Not decoration, but deliberate symbolic imagery. Radiocarbon dating placed the site at roughly 11,600 years old. Here's the reversal. There was no farming yet. No pottery. No domesticated animals. The people who carved and raised these stones were hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons, chasing gazelle across open steppe. They built a temple before they built a farm. Schmidt's conclusion, published across multiple papers through the German Archaeological Institute, flipped the assumed order of human civilization on its head. It wasn't agriculture that produced religion. It may have been the reverse. The need to gather, to build, to worship something together that eventually forced people to settle down long enough to start growing food to feed the workers. Belief came first. Bread came second. That alone rewired how historians think about the ancient mind. But it still didn't answer the real question. Göbekli Tepe proves ancient humans were organizing around belief 11,500 years ago. It doesn't explain where that belief came from in the first place. So researchers kept digging, literally. Here's where it gets stranger. And where the story you just accepted gets overturned again. If belief in something unseen predates farming by thousands of years, does it also predate our species? Travel now, backward, past Göbekli Tepe, past the last ice age, into a cave system in South Africa called the Rising Star Cave System. In 2013, and again in 2018, a team led by paleoanthropologist Lee Berger recovered hundreds of bones belonging to a previously unknown hominin species, Homo naledi, small brain, about the size of an orange. A brain roughly a third the size of yours, and yet the bodies weren't scattered by predators or washed in by floods. They were found deep inside a nearly inaccessible chamber, reachable only through a vertical chute barely wide enough for a human body to squeeze through. A passage researchers nicknamed the chute for exactly that reason. No natural process explains bodies ending up there. Not water, not scavengers. Someone carried them in, deliberately, repeatedly, into total darkness, far from any signs of ordinary habitation. Berger's team, publishing through the eLife Journal and Wits University, proposed something that stunned much of the field: intentional disposal of the dead. Possibly even ritual. by a species with a brain a third our size, no written language, no complex tools, no fire evidence at the deposit site. And yet, it looks like Homo naledi was doing something with their dead that wasn't practical, wasn't necessary, wasn't about hygiene or safety. It looks like they cared what happened to a body after the person inside it was gone. Let that sit for a second, because if that's true, and the debate over it is still loud, still ongoing, some researchers deeply skeptical of ritual interpretation for a small-brained hominin, then the instinct to treat the dead as more than just meat and bone might be older than modern humans altogether. It might not even be ours. It might be something evolution built into more than one species, independently, because it worked. We can't prove intent. We probably never fully will. You cannot interview a hominin who died 300,000 years ago. The honest answer is, we don't know for certain what Homo naledi believed, or if believed is even the right word for a mind so different from ours. But something happened in that cave that looks a lot like the first flicker of an idea. The dead are still here somehow. If the idea that religion might predate our own species is the kind of thing that grabs you by the collar, subscribe now, because we're about to explain the actual mechanism in your brain that makes belief in the unseen almost impossible to switch off. It's the same mechanism that made you flinch at that hedge. And once you see how it works, you will never walk past a dark doorway the same way again. So here's the turning point. Here's where a survival reflex becomes a god. Picture yourself 40,000 years ago. Not in a cave with paintings, out in open grassland, at dusk, alone, with a spear you barely trust. The grass moves. 20 meters away. No wind. You have two options. Option 1. Assume it's nothing. Continue walking. Save your energy. Don't waste adrenaline on a false alarm. Option 2. Assume it's something. A predator, an agent, something with intention watching you, deciding whether to strike. Here's the catch. The actual mechanism researchers now believe is at the root of supernatural belief. Cognitive scientist Justin Barrett, working out of Oxford Center for Anthropology and Mind, named this mechanism the Hyperactive Agency Detection Device, HAD for short. Translated into plain language, it's a brain wired to over-assume that things are alive, watching, and intentional, even when they're not. Why would evolution build a brain that jumps to the wrong conclusion? Because of what each mistake costs. If you assume the grass is nothing and it's actually a leopard, you're dead. No warning. No second chance. If you assume the grass is a leopard and it's actually just wind, you've wasted 10 seconds of adrenaline and looked a little foolish to nobody. One error kills you. The other costs you nothing. So natural selection didn't build a brain that's accurate. It built a brain that's paranoid. A brain that assumes agency first and checks the facts later, because checking first for our ancestors sometimes meant checking never again. That's not superstition. That's math. Cold, brutal evolutionary math, running silently behind every flinch you've ever had at a noise in the dark. Now extend that mechanism forward, not just to rustling grass, but to thunder, to lightning, to a sudden death with no visible wound, to a dream where a dead relative speaks to you, clear as daylight, and then you wake up and they're gone again. A brain wired to detect agents everywhere doesn't stop at predators. It reaches for agents to explain everything. Storms, disease, dreams, death, luck, fire, the sun disappearing at night and returning every morning like something choosing to come back. No debate. No blueprint. No committee of ancient priests sitting down to invent religion on purpose. Just a hyperactive alarm system built for predators, misfiring across an entire universe of things it was never designed to interpret, and finding, in that misfire, its first god. But a reflex this important needed proof. It needed to be tested by cost. And ancient life provided that cost constantly. Come forward now into a specific kind of night. Cold. Late Pleistocene Ice Age cold, the kind that kills slower than a predator but just as certainly. A hunter-gatherer band, maybe 15 people, sheltering in a rock overhang. One member, call her nothing because we'll never know her name, has gone out at dusk to check a snare line. She doesn't come back. The others wait. An hour. 2. Here's the mechanism in motion, playing out in real time, at the edge of a fire that's burning too fast through its fuel. If nobody in that group had a hyperactive alarm system, if their brains defaulted to probably fine, probably nothing, someone else goes out alone into the dark to check, unprepared, unarmed enough. And the group loses 2 people instead of 1. But a brain wired for worst-case agency detection does something different. It assumes presence. It assumes a predator is out there, patient, waiting for exactly this kind of overconfidence. So the group doesn't send someone alone. They go together, with fire, with spears, they call out. They make noise deliberately, because noise signals group strength to any listening predator, and the assumption of a listening agent changes their behavior before they even know if one exists. That assumption, agent, unseen, dangerous, currently listening, is not paranoia. It's protocol, and when they find her, sometimes alive, cold but breathing, sometimes not, the lesson repeats itself into the group's memory. The world outside the firelight is not empty. Something is always potentially there. Assume otherwise, and eventually you won't get to learn from the mistake. That single, repeated, brutal lesson, replayed across tens of thousands of nights, tens of thousands of years, across every human population on every continent. That's the training data. That's how an evolved reflex became a cultural certainty. The dark is inhabited. The unseen has intention. Act accordingly. Here's the part that turns a theory into a fact you can hold in your hand. If the hyperactive agency detection device is really behind humanity's first gods, it shouldn't just show up in one place. It should show up everywhere ancient humans lived, independently, without contact, without shared culture, because it's not a cultural idea. It's a brain wiring. Descend now into Blombos Cave on the southern coast of what's now South Africa. In the early 2000s, archaeologist Christopher Henshelwood and his team recovered pieces of ochre, red mineral pigment, deliberately engraved with cross-hatched geometric patterns, dated to roughly 75,000 to 100,000 years ago, published through the journal Science. This find pushed back the earliest confirmed evidence of symbolic behavior in modern humans by tens of thousands of years. Ochre has no practical use as food, no obvious use as a tool. Its most likely function, according to Henshelwood's team, was symbolic, marking bodies, marking meaning, possibly marking a boundary between the visible and the invisible. Now travel to the other side of the planet, to Sulawesi, Indonesia. In 2019, a research team led by Maxime Aubert used uranium series dating to confirm cave paintings there, hunting scenes involving therianthropes, figures with mixed human and animal features, at over 43,900 years old, among the oldest known figurative art on Earth. Published in Nature, half human, half animal figures, not a documentary record of a hunt. A depiction of something else, something that doesn't exist in nature, something imagined. And in France, Chauvet Cave, dated by teams working with the French Ministry of Culture to around 36,000 years ago, contains paintings of lions, rhinoceroses, and bears, rendered with anatomical precision that suggests careful, repeated observation, layered with handprints and abstract markings whose meaning nobody has ever fully decoded. 3 continents, tens of thousands of years apart in some cases. No contact between these populations. No shared teacher, no shared myth passed hand to hand, and yet the same underlying behavior appears again and again, marking the world with meaning that has no survival function on its own. Imagining beings that don't exist. Treating the unseen as something worth painting, worth carving, or worth burying beside your dead. That's not coincidence. That's convergence. The same mechanism, the same hyperactive alarm for unseen agents, independently producing the same output in populations that had never met. No debate. No shared blueprint. Just biology doing what biology does when it's this deeply wired in. Go back now to that hedge. That rustle. That flinch you had walking home. That started all of this. You know now what that reflex actually is. Not superstition, not weakness. An inheritance, passed down through Homo naledi, carrying bodies into total darkness for reasons we still argue about. Through hunter-gatherers at Blombos Cave, marking stone with patterns that meant something only in their minds. Through painters in Sulawesi and Chauvet, giving form to creatures that never walked the earth. Through the builders of Göbekli Tepe, raising stone circles before they'd planted a single seed of wheat. The leopard in the grass taught the reflex. The dead in the cave taught the ritual. The ochre taught the mark. The cave wall taught the image. Stone circle taught the gathering. Each one built on the reflex before it. Each one took a brain's paranoid, evolutionarily cheap assumption, something might be watching, and turned it into culture, into art, into architecture, into belief systems that would eventually split into thousands of religions across the globe, all sharing one ancestor. A nervous system that couldn't afford to assume the grass was empty. You don't build temples anymore, most of you. You don't carve ochre or paint therianthropes on cave walls, but you knock on wood. You say bless you to a stranger's sneeze without thinking about why. You apologize out loud to an inanimate object when you stub your toe on it. You feel for half a second that an empty house is not quite empty when you walk in alone at night. That's not superstition left over from a less rational past. That's the hyperactive agency detection device, still running, still assuming presence before absence, exactly as it did in a hunter's chest 40,000 years ago, exactly as it may have in a small-brained hominin dragging a body into a cave 300,000 years before that. We still don't know. Not with certainty whether Homo naledi believed in anything at all. That mystery stays open. Maybe forever, but you, walking home, flinching at a hedge, locking your door against a threat you can't see and probably isn't there, you are not being irrational. You are being ancient. You are the end of a chain that started the moment a brain, somewhere in the deep dark of prehistory, decided it was safer to believe in something than to risk that nothing was there at all. That belief kept your ancestors alive long enough to become you.